Yeah, welcome back to the SportsMax Zone. We kick things off with football. Earlier on Friday, the draw was made for the 2022 FIFA World Cup, set to kick off in Qatar on the 21st of November. Defending champions France have been drawn in Group D alongside Denmark, Tunisia, and either Peru, Australia, or the United Arab Emirates. Let's have a quick look at those groups now. Qatar, the hosts, with Ecuador, Senegal, and the Netherlands in Group A. Group B having England, Iran, the USA, and Euro playoff opponent. Group C has Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, and Poland. Group D, France, playoff qualifier, Denmark and Tunisia. Group E, Spain, qualifier from Interconfed playoffs, Germany and Japan. Group F has Belgium, who have been unseated as world number one by the Brazilians. Canada, Morocco, and Croatia. Brazil, the new world number one, back on top after 5 years off the top spot in FIFA's world rankings. They have Serbia, Switzerland, and Cameroon to contend with. And Group H has Cristiano Ronaldo's Portugal, Ghana, Uruguay, and the Korea Republic. Now, joining us to discuss the draw and to identify the obligatory group of death is Simon Evans. Simon, welcome to the SportsMax Zone. As usual, always great to have you on. And lots of discussion today that it's a bit of a struggle to find a group of death, which usually in all tournaments you tend to be able to identify without much fuss.
Yeah, there isn't an obvious one that really stands out as being, that group of death that's going to, could be any of the four teams go through. Possibly, if you were to look at it in terms of difficulty, you might say Brazil's group. There's not an obvious easy game there for Brazil. If you look at that group, but you still think Brazil's going to go top. But Serbia are a decent side. Switzerland will be difficult to beat. And Cameroon are a team who we've seen perform at World Cups before. So I would say if you had to nominate one group, I would go with Brazil's Group G.
Yeah, before we dissect the groups though, Simon, I saw a report from the highly regarded Reuters international news agency, which you are a prominent writer for, labeling Brazil as the favorites. Were you the author of that script?
I don't think I was. That might have been somebody writing it off the bookmakers' odds. I think the bookmakers have shifted Brazil to favourites. I'm not sure they'd be my favourites. I still think the holders, actually, France would be my favourites. But yeah, there's a good 5 or 6 teams, I think, who've got a chance of winning this World Cup.
Yeah, and we'll talk about them, I'm sure, in the next 10 minutes. So the Italians are still mourning their absence from the World Cup, which, to be honest, if you're a genuine football fan, you're going to miss the Italians. But what of the other groups? And you just mentioned France, that you think they have a really good shot at repeating as champions, which is usually quite difficult to achieve. What are your thoughts on their group?
Yeah, so they're up against Denmark, who, interestingly, they have to play twice before they play them at the World Cup because they've drawn them in the Nations League group. So they're going to be playing against Denmark in June and September. So that gives a bit of added spice to those games. Tunisia will have a huge following here in Doha because I was at the Club World Cup here a couple of years ago, and there was a Tunisian club team playing, and there was 10, 15, 20,000 Tunisian fans here. So they'll have almost a kind of home advantage here, I think. So it's with the playoff team going in there, they should be able to get through that group.
Yeah, Simon, I'm happy you established that you are indeed in Doha, Qatar. You're always the man closest to the action for us, and we're very happy for that. Simon, I can't believe that you started the conversation with Lance and you didn't talk about the obvious team. Is it that football is coming home after 56 years now, given the draw that your good old England have got, my friend?
You know what? I was looking at that group, and you think, yes, England should get out of that group. But then you look at the rest of the path. They could play then possibly Holland, and then if things go the way people would expect, they would have France in the quarterfinals. So yes, it looks like a group where you would expect England to beat Iran and the USA. And the Euro playoff team could be Scotland or Wales. Ukraine obviously in there as well. But, there's quite a lot of spice in that group with the politics with, USA and Iran. And, of course, England-USA is a kind of, it's not really a derby match, is it? But there's a little bit of history there. It's an interesting group, but no, I would not like to hear the words coming home at any stage during this tournament. I think that thing has run its course. After what happened the other summer with the Euros, I think we've had enough of that one.
Yeah, talk about Portugal's group for me, Simon. Would Ronaldo and the company be comfortable with what they have so far? There's one team yet to be identified in that group.
Well, the interesting thing in that group to me is Ghana against Uruguay, because I'm sure the educated and good-memoried listeners will remember 2010 World Cup in South Africa, where the quarterfinal was Ghana-Uruguay, when Luis Suarez handled the ball on the line and a penalty was given, which
Asamoah Gyan missed.
Exactly, hit the bar, didn't he? And then they lost on penalties, and they would have been the first if that rule had been that a handling on the line is an automatic goal, as a lot of people think it should be. Then Ghana would have been the first team from Africa to get to the semi-finals of the World Cup. So there'll be some real needle in that game. It's not an easy group, actually. I mean, we're saying there's no groups of death, but if you're Portugal and you played against Ghana, a well-established African nation with good international experience, Uruguay, who are a good side with quality players, and then South Korea, who have never really been, dummies in tournaments. They've also been regular features at World Cups. So there's not really an easy route there. I'm not calling it a group of death, but I don't think that's an easy group for Portugal.
I would agree with you that on paper, to me on paper, that's the stickiest group for any of the teams involved. Let's talk about our Canadians, Simon, because they find themselves in a group after their last showing in 1986. I was watching back some film of their performances in 1986. Didn't make an impression then. A long time between innings, if we may stray into cricket. How do they look with the draw that they've received?
Well, they're an interesting team, aren't they? Again, people who watch the CONCACAF qualifiers will have seen this is a completely different Canada team to anyone we've seen before. That 86 was the only time they've got to a World Cup, and they looked like a semi-pro team, didn't they? Let's be honest. And now, they've got young players playing in good leagues around the world, players who've had good experience in MLS as well. And so they're an interesting prospect, a bit of an unknown quantity for the other teams as well. But Belgium, people still talk about Belgium as being one of the favourites. They're not for me. I think that team, that golden generation, as it got called, I think they're past their best now. You look at the defenders in particular who've aged, they're all mid to late 30s. And I'm not seeing Belgium as like a real contender in this. But again, Morocco, another team with a lot of experience. And Croatia, were beaten finalists in 2018.
Yeah, let's look at the group of the hosts, Simon, because it would be remiss of us to do. They may be spying on your conversation and say, Simon Evans, no mention of the hosts, so I won't put you under that pressure. Let's look at Group A with Qatar, Ecuador in it. I've told Lance, Simon, privately, that Ecuador have an exciting young team and that he shouldn't fall asleep on them. And I'm looking at this group and I'm thinking, Simon, that the Ecuadorians will be confident that they can accompany the Netherlands, the favourites, out of this group. What say you?
Yeah, you would expect them to be there. I mean, obviously, the Qatar team, have got a lot of players who've become adopted Qatari citizens over the years, so that they've got a squad that's better than anyone they've ever had before, and they're playing at home. But, I don't expect them to get out of that group. I agree with you about Ecuador. Some of the wide players, they've got the pace in that Ecuador team is really impressive. But Senegal, unless I'm mistaken, they just won the African Cup of Nations, didn't they? So, they're a team with Sadio Mane. They're going to do pretty well as well. So that could be an interesting game, Senegal against Ecuador and Netherlands. So there's some interesting... the thing about not having that really tough group is that there is quite a lot of balance in this, though. I don't think... The way football's developed over the last few years, there's not really any muppet teams, if you like, who are going to be easily rolled over. Teams are well organised defensively. They've got coaches who've learned the same techniques as coaches everywhere else. So it'll be a tight group. But I agree with you about Ecuador. They could be one to watch. Yeah,
we have to talk about Argentina, because I was making a case on my Instagram that I was telling the fans who nearly killed me, Simon, that ball Jesus, as we call him here at SportsMax, Lionel Messi, dying embers of his career for a long time now, and I'm not expecting much from him at the World Cup. But his fans tell me that he's been playing within himself, Simon, saving himself for the World Cup. Would he be happy with the draw that Argentina have?
Yes, but almost the same as what we've been talking about some of these other groups as well. Yes, you would. You'd expect them to beat Saudi Arabia, but Mexico, again, people familiar with CONCACAF know how good Mexico can be. They haven't been outstanding in qualifying, but that'll be an interesting game, Mexico-Argentina, because Mexico really do raise the game when they get to World Cup. So if you remember how they performed in Brazil in particular, they were, they were much better than they were in qualifying. And Poland, no team with Lewandowski in it can be discounted from a game of football. So, yeah, I think they would be happy with it, but there's some challenges there for them.
Is this Africa's year, Simon, and I'm extending it to Lance as well, is this Africa's year to produce a semi-finalist for the first time, Simon, based on the fact that you've made a very good point, that the quality across the teams has been equalized in many respects. You don't have any teams waiting to be beaten 14-0 or 9-0, as we've seen in the past 11-0. But has Africa's time come to have a World Cup semi-finalist based on what you've seen from the teams in the hat already?
I don't think we've ever been in a situation where there's been a better chance than this, because you look at the growth of African players and their strengths and experience. In the past, most of the players, when African teams first started making an impact in the World Cup, which would probably be, you'd be talking about 1990 with Cameroon in Italy, they were still players that we didn't know because they just played in Africa. We weren't seeing them on television. We weren't seeing them in the European leagues or anything. Now, most of those squads, when you look through the list, they're playing in the French league, they're playing in Italy, they're playing in Spain, they're playing in England. We talk about players like Sadio Mane, who we just mentioned. These are players who know exactly how to get past good quality Premier League defenders, and they're going to be up against, let's be honest, weaker defenders most of the time than that. So, these players are top professionals now. There's no reason at all why an African side couldn't get to the last four this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what? I hear you, Simon, and I take your point. But there's a part of me that I'm just not seeing where Senegal and Ghana and Morocco are any better than some of the top teams that have gone to the World Cup before from Africa. There were some Nigerian teams and Ghana teams that were very solid, and I'm not sure in looking at this Africa bunch going to Qatar that I can conclusively say that these teams are better than those of the past. So to me, the jury is still out on what the African nations will do at the World Cup in Qatar. I wish them well. I'd love to see an African nation getting to the semi-finals, but it's going to be tough. I don't think we've looked at Group E yet, Simon, with Spain, who were one of the most recent champions of football in the World Cup. The Germans, along with Brazil, the most successful in World Cup history. What of this group, the CONCACAF team, Costa Rica, still having a chance to get in?
Yeah, I think that's one group you can look at and say, there would have to be major upsets for it not to be Spain and Germany going through from that group. Although, Japan is another one of these teams that has consistently qualified and is always a well-organised side, but they don't seem to do it when it comes up against the big European teams. So I would say that that's the one group you can look at and go, yeah, I think paper form will happen there.
Yeah. Well, we spoke about Mexico and Canada and then just a brief look at Costa Rica there, but the USA, the other CONCACAF team. So from this confederation in CONCACAF, you did talk about England a bit, but that Group B with England, Iran, the USA, and that playoff decider between Wales, Scotland and Ukraine. How does the USA stack up there? They have a very young team and, from a USA developmental standpoint, they'd like to see their team make a mark here.
Yeah, and I think there's no doubt that it's probably the most talented bunch of individual players that the US have taken to a World Cup, and players like Pulisic. There was all those years when Landon Donovan was the star of the team, and he was never a player as good as he was in the US jersey. He was never anything on the level of a Pulisic, or for that matter, Gio Reyna, who I think is a really exciting player. I don't understand why he doesn't start all the time for the USA. But is it a strong team? Is their coach up to scratch? Greg Berhalter It's got a lot of critics inside the USA who question his appointment and whether they're strong enough. They didn't qualify particularly impressively either, did they? So, you know, it's a bunch of talented individuals. We'll see. You get to World Cup, and the previous US coach, Jurgen Klinsmann, used to make this point, who took Germany to the semi-finals as well, of course, that it's all about those 2 weeks you get in camp before you go. Can you turn this bunch of individuals from different clubs into a unit, into a club team? Can you create that atmosphere where they're all really competing for each other? The Italians did that at the Euros, for example. It wasn't a super talented side, but it was a real team. So that's the big question for me with the USA. Can they become a real team?
Thing for me, Lance, as you wrap, is that the USA, I think, they lack goals. It is true that individually they're more talented than any selection we've seen. Yeah. But unlike in previous times when you had a deadly marksman by US standards who could get goals for you, curiously this team lacks that killer. Yeah. There's nobody to kill you in this US team, and I think that maybe they're onto it.
All right, Simon, we'll be in touch. Of course, the World Cup fever is heightening now because of that draw today. And, of course, there's still a lot of other football that we talk about weekly. So we'll be in touch, sir.
All right, all the best.
Yeah, Simon Evans, and getting ready for World Cup football starting off in November of this year. Never had a World Cup being played at this time of the year, but it's going to be on and it's going to be special, as it usually is. We go to break. Still a lot more to come on the SportsMax Zone.
Keep watching SportsMax on YouTube for live and exciting sports. Subscribe to SportsMax on cable and download the SportsMax app to watch anytime, anywhere.